That late autumn afternoon tasted like metal on my tongue, a strange, coppery bitterness I couldn't place until much later, when I understood it for what it was. Fear, real fear, the kind that sinks its teeth into the back of your throat. My name is Margaret Hale, though most people call me Maggie. I'm 70 now, but at the time this began, I had just turned 69. I had spent my entire adult life believing that if a mother poured enough kindness into her children, it would come back to her one day like a harvest. I believed patience could mend anything. I believed devotion guaranteed loyalty. I was wrong. The day my world shifted began like any other, in the little kitchen of the house I bought with 4 decades of early mornings and crowded classrooms. I had been a teacher my whole life, 3rd grade mostly. The kind of job that left you with stories rather than money. Still, the house was mine, paid for in full, brick by stubborn brick. The scent of cinnamon hung in the air that afternoon. I had been baking, something I did often since retirement gave me long, quiet hours. Outside my window, the dogwood tree I planted when my son, Daniel, was born fluttered with pale blossoms fighting the early cold. Those blossoms had always been loyal. More loyal, it turned out, than the people who grew up under their shade. As I stirred a saucepan on the stove, I heard the front door open. Not gently, not casually. It slammed into the wall like someone entering with purpose. I didn't startle. I knew those footsteps. Heavy, rushed, impatient. "Mom," Daniel called, his voice tight. "We need to talk." He didn't sound like my boy. Not the man I had raised. His tone had an edge in it, sharp enough to cut. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped into the living room, expecting he needed help, or maybe just wanted to vent about his job. He used to come home to rant about everything: broken appliances, nosy neighbors, traffic on the freeway. I was the safe place to unload. But the man standing in my living room that afternoon didn't look like he needed comfort. He looked like someone preparing for battle. Daniel's shirt was wrinkled, as if he had slept in it. His hair stuck to his forehead. His eyes, normally warm brown, looked glassy, restless. Behind him, half hidden by the doorframe, stood Elena, my daughter-in-law. She offered me a pointed smile that failed to reach her eyes. "Hello, Mrs. Hale," she said cheerfully, almost theatrically. "Always nice to see you." I didn't respond. Something cold settled low in my stomach. Instinct, the kind mothers develop after a lifetime of reading storms before they break. "Sit down," Daniel said. Not "come sit," not "do you have a minute?" Just, "sit down." For a moment, I simply stared at him. I had known Daniel his entire life. I had soothed his fevers and celebrated his birthdays and stayed awake worrying about him more nights than I could count. He had never spoken to me like that. But he wanted control, and I gave it to him. I sat in the old armchair by the window. The same chair where I had cradled him during midnight fevers, where he sat curled against me during thunderstorms as a child. Elena shut the front door. I flinched at the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. He tossed it onto the coffee table with a sharp flick of his wrist. "Sign that," he said. I leaned forward. My eyesight wasn't what it used to be. The words blurred, but one phrase leapt at me: durable power of attorney. I frowned, confused. "Daniel, what is this?" "Why? So I can take care of things," he said bluntly. "Your accounts, the house, everything. That's too much for you now." "Too much, for me?" I blinked at him. "Daniel, I'm capable. I've always handled my own finances." "You're old, Mom," he snapped. "You shouldn't have to worry about all that anymore." There it was. Not concern, not love, a verdict. Elena gave a delicate laugh from behind him. "It's better this way, Maggie. You'll thank him later." Her voice was syrup sweet, but the kind you choke on, not the kind you savor. Daniel stepped toward me, close enough that I could smell the faint bitterness of alcohol on his breath. "This house," he said quietly, "is too much responsibility for you." "I'm trying to help." "That isn't help," I whispered. "That's control." His jaw tightened. "Just sign it." "No." The word surprised me. Honestly, it surprised all of us. It rose from somewhere I hadn't visited in a long time, a place where I was still Margaret Hale, owner of her life, owner of her decisions. Daniel exhaled slowly, as though my refusal was an inconvenience, not a sentence. Then he unbuckled his belt. The leather whispered through the loops of his jeans, slowly, deliberately. He wrapped it around his fist, the way boys do in movies when they want to intimidate. I had never seen him look like that. Never. Mom, he said quietly, I'm going to ask you one more time. I stared at him, at the boy I raised, at the man I didn't recognize, and I realized, terribly, that he was willing to hurt me. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Short, sharp, ding dong. Daniel froze. Alina's eyes widened. Who's that? Ding dong, ding dong. I stood. My legs trembled but moved anyway. Don't open that door, Daniel snapped. But I kept walking. I reached the door. My hands shook as I twisted the knob. When it swung open, I saw two men standing on my porch. One wore a tailored gray suit and carried a leather briefcase. The other wore a police uniform. Good afternoon, the man in the suit said. Is this the home of Mrs. Margaret Hale? My breath broke in my chest. Yes. Behind me, I heard the belt clatter onto the floor. The suited man offered me a kind smile. I'm attorney Samuel Carter, ma'am. And this is Officer Grayson. We received a call. Someone was concerned that you might be in danger. I stared at him, stunned. I didn't call anyone, I said. I know, he replied quietly. But someone who cares about you did. And in that moment, standing in my doorway, trembling, afraid, terribly aware of the betrayal behind me, I realized this wasn't the beginning of a nightmare. It was the middle of one. And what came next, I never could have imagined. Officer Grayson stepped further into the house before I could invite him, his gaze sweeping across the living room. His eyes halted on Daniel's clenched fists, then dropped to the belt lying on the carpet. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. That one glance changed the temperature of the room. Alina swallowed hard, her hands shaking as she tucked a lock of hair behind her ear. This is a misunderstanding, she said quickly. A huge one. We were just visiting. Nothing happened. Attorney Carter didn't even look at her. His focus was on me, kind, observant, steady. Mrs. Hale, he said gently, are you hurt? I shook my head. Were you threatened? My throat tightened. I opened my mouth, and closed it. Daniel spoke for me. She wasn't threatened. This is ridiculous. Officer Grayson raised a hand sharply. The room fell silent. Sir, I'll speak to your mother myself, he said. He stepped toward me. Mrs. Hale, would you like to talk somewhere private? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to step outside, away from the house that was no longer safe. But fear glued my shoes to the floor. Mr. Carter saw it. May I? He asked. I nodded, and we moved toward the dining room. The house felt smaller than usual, walls closing in under the weight of everything I hadn't seen coming. Once we were alone, he spoke quietly. Mrs. Hale, someone reached out to our office. Someone who was worried about you. He paused, and they were right to be concerned. I didn't ask anyone to call, I whispered. I didn't think I needed help. But you do, he said. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, thin blue veins pushing against fragile skin. When had I gotten so old? So vulnerable? I never imagined my own son. I stopped. Couldn't finish. Mr. Carter filled the silence. Financial abuse from family is more common than most people think. I handle cases like this weekly. His voice softened. It often begins with pressure. Then intimidation. Then threats. Sometimes worse. I nodded numbly. He continued, before we discuss anything else, I need you to understand something very important. You are not at fault. You didn't cause this. And you don't deserve it. Something in me cracked, not from his sympathy, but from the relief of being seen. When we walked back to the living room, Elena was pacing. Daniel stood rigidly by the window, jaw clenched, arms folded across his chest like a barricade. Officer Grayson turned toward me. Ma'am, do you feel safe with your son in the home right now? I hesitated. Daniel's eyes snapped toward me. Mama, he said through clenched teeth. Don't do this. Mama. He hadn't called me that in years. And still, the word didn't soften the truth. No, I whispered. I don't feel safe. Elena gasped. Daniel's face fell for a moment, but only a moment, before anger replaced it. You're exaggerating, he barked. I wasn't going to hurt you. You always make things bigger than they are. Officer Grayson stepped between us. Sir, that's enough. Daniel spoke through gritted teeth. I was trying to help her. She needs structure. She's forgetting things. Her memory is going. She's vulnerable. My memory is fine, I said softly. He scoffed. Please. That sound, dismissive, superior, hit me harder than anything else that day. And, oddly, it unlocked a door in my mind I had kept shut for decades. Not just today. Not just the belt. Not just the document. All of it. Because this wasn't the first time Daniel had stood in my house and demanded something without caring how it made me feel. It wasn't the first time he had looked at me as though I were an obstacle, not a mother. It wasn't the first time I had ignored the warning bells. And suddenly, memories, sharp, fragmented, surged forward, as though they had been waiting for permission. The early years. When Daniel was born, I was 28. My husband, Frank, worked at a printing company. I taught school. We didn't have much, but we had what mattered. Daniel came into the world screaming, furious from the beginning, as though life had owed him something from the second he inhaled. Frank laughed when the nurse placed him in his arms. "That boy's got lungs," he said. "He'll grow into a fighter." He said it with pride. But I always wondered if he was right in ways we never expected. Daniel was a beautiful child, big brown eyes, thick dark hair, a smile that could melt your resolve like warm butter. He knew how to charm even as a toddler. He'd pout and I'd fold. He'd cry and I'd rush. He'd demand, and somehow I'd always give. I used to think it was love. Now I know it was something else. The slow erosion of boundaries I didn't know I needed. Frank adored Daniel, but he was stricter. More structured. Daniel listened to him. Mostly. Still, there were signs. Small ones. Seeds that would grow into things I couldn't have imagined. When he was 9, Daniel borrowed money from my purse, $20, then lied about it with confidence that startled me. When he was 11, he broke a neighbor's window and convinced the younger kids to take the blame. When he was 14, he talked his way out of a failing grade by manipulating a substitute teacher into believing his stories. Frank would shake his head and say, "That boy's too smart for his own good, Maggie. You've got to stop giving in to him." But I didn't know how to say no to him. He was my only child. My whole world. And when Frank died, suddenly, painfully, Daniel became everything I had left. Parenting alone does something to you. You become softer where you should be firmer. You give more than you should. You forgive too easily. You overlook what should be confronted. The year Frank died, Daniel withdrew. He disappeared into his room, stopped talking, stopped smiling. I felt guilty asking anything of him. Every no felt cruel. Every limit felt unfair. I'll make it up to him, I told myself. He's grieving. He needs understanding. So I gave, and gave, and gave. And Daniel learned something dangerous. All he had to do to get what he wanted was convince me that he hurt more than I could bear. Elena arrives. Elena came into his life when Daniel was 21 and I was 53. She was sharp, glamorous, and uncomfortably perceptive. She could read people's weaknesses like instructions on a package. Her first words to me were, "So you're the famous Mrs. Hale." Famous? I didn't understand then. I do now. Daniel told her everything, my softness, my guilt, my fears, my tendency to give until I had nothing left. And she used that information like currency. Together, they became a storm I never saw coming. Back to the present. Officer Grayson's voice pulled me back. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "would you like your son and daughter-in-law removed from the property?" Daniel stared at me. For the first time that afternoon, he looked scared. "Mama," he whispered, "you wouldn't do that." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the boy I raised, but the man he had become. A man who saw me as something to take from, not someone to protect. "Yes," I said quietly. "I would." Elena gasped. Daniel's face hardened. "You'll regret this." "No," I said, "I won't." Officer Grayson gestured toward the door. "Sir, ma'am, time to go." As they stepped out, Daniel turned back one last time. "This isn't over," he warned. But as the door shut behind him, and the lock clicked into place, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not relief exactly. Something quieter. The first breath of a story I hadn't yet told. Attorney Carter left shortly after ensuring I was safe for the evening. He promised to return the next morning with the necessary paperwork and a plan to secure my home and finances. Officer Grayson did one last sweep of the house before heading out as well. When the door finally closed behind them, the quiet returned. But this time it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that feels like standing in the eye of a storm, still for a moment, but with the knowledge that another surge is coming. I walked through my living room slowly, touching familiar objects as if grounding myself in the life I still owned. The framed photo of Daniel at age 6, the one where he's hugging a trophy so large he could barely lift it. The embroidered pillow I stitched during my first year of retirement. The bookshelf with decades of children's stories I couldn't bear to give away. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every passing car sent my heart leaping. I kept imagining Daniel returning with more determination, more anger, more entitlement. The betrayal didn't hurt the way I expected it to. It wasn't a sharp pain. It was a heavy one. A weight pressing into my chest, reminding me that I had spent 69 years loving someone who had learned to weaponize that love. At dawn, exhausted and trembling, I sat in the kitchen with a mug of tea I couldn't bring myself to drink. The morning light crept across the tiled floor, stretching toward me as if offering some kind of reassurance. For the first time in years, I locked every door. The visit, around 9 o'clock, just as the kettle whistled again, there was a soft knock at the front door. Not loud, not urgent, gentle. I froze. Not Daniel, not Elena. They never knocked gently. I approached the door cautiously, peering through the side window. It wasn't Attorney Carter, or the police. It was a young woman. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun. She wore a backpack slung over one shoulder, her posture hesitant, as though she was ready to run if the door opened the wrong way. My breath caught. Lily. I unlocked the door slowly. When I opened it, she took one step forward, then stopped, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Hi, Grandma," she whispered. The sound of her voice broke something in me. I didn't cry, not yet. But my knees nearly buckled. "Sweetheart," I managed. What are you doing here?" She shrugged, but the movement was tight, restrained. "I wanted to see you. Dad doesn't know I'm here." Her eyes darted past me, scanning the living room. Not like Daniel did, looking for something to take. She looked for danger, out of fear. "Come inside," I said quickly. The relief on her face was visible as she stepped through the doorway. I shut the door behind us. The truth begins to spill. We sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched tea, mine folded tightly in my lap. She didn't speak right away. Neither did I finally. She inhaled shakily. "Grandma, I'm sorry." "For what?" I asked gently. "For everything," she whispered. "For not coming sooner. For not telling you sooner. For letting him treat you like that." There was no hesitation in how she said him. Not Dad, not my father, just him. That alone told me everything. "Lily," I said softly, "did you call the attorney?" She lowered her head. Tears slid down her cheeks. "Yes." It felt like all the air left the room. I reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away. She squeezed, desperate, as if holding on to me anchored her to something real. "How did you know what happened last night?" I asked quietly. Her voice broke. Because he wasn't just going after you, Grandma." I felt a chill. "What do you mean?" Her lip trembled. "He wants your house." She looked up. Her eyes were a mix of shame and fury. "He wants to sell it. He told Elena that once he has control over your finances, they'll finally be set. Their debts will be gone." My blood ran cold. So it wasn't just greed. It wasn't about helping. It wasn't even about family. It was desperation and calculation. "He said," Lily continued, her voice shaking, "that you were old. That you didn't need this much space. That the house would be more useful to him. Useful. My home. My memories. 40 years of my life. Useful. He joked," she added quietly, "that you wouldn't last long enough to miss it anyway." A sound escaped me, something between a gasp and a sob. My vision blurred. Lily squeezed my hand harder. "Grandma, I'm so sorry." "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered. "None of this is your fault." She shook her head violently. "It is. I should have told you everything years ago. I should have warned you when he started talking about your accounts. When he asked me to find your bank papers. When he..." She cut herself off, covering her mouth. "When he what?" I asked gently. She didn't answer. Instead, she dug into her backpack and pulled out a folded envelope. "This is why I called the attorney." She slid it toward me. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a printed email thread. I recognized Daniel's name, his email signature, his tone, demanding, entitled, "Icy." But the messages weren't sent to Elena. They were sent to a real estate broker. My breath caught. The subject line read, "Urgent, property listing preparation." The first email from Daniel said, "I will have full control of the property soon. Begin valuation. Preparations for sale should not start until I confirm ownership. Target listing date. 2 weeks from today." 2 weeks. 2 weeks. He planned to take everything in 2 weeks. I gripped the edges of the paper until my knuckles went white. Lily whispered, "Dad didn't want to wait anymore. He said he'd make you sign on Tuesday or Wednesday." When I realized he meant force, I couldn't stay quiet. A tear slid down my cheek. Lily, I said softly, did he ever hurt you? She looked down. Another tear fell. This one wasn't for me. Yes, she whispered. The words were tiny, but they were heavy enough to crush bone. I reached for her, and she collapsed into my arms, shaking, crying quietly the way children cry when the fear has lived in them so long that it has shaped them. We sat like that for a long time. Her trembling heart against mine. Her pain mixing with my own. Her truth cracking open the rest of the story. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were red but clear. Grandma, she said, it's time you knew everything. My heartbeat quickened, because the look in her eyes told me something neither attorney nor police had said yet. Something I didn't want to believe, but something I needed to hear. The truth, all of it. Lily sat with her shoulders curled inward, as though bracing for a cold wind no one else could feel. I had seen her sad before, quiet, distant, but never like this. This was a girl carrying too much weight for far too long. I moved the teapot aside and folded my hands in my lap, steadying myself. Sweetheart, I said softly, tell me what you need to tell me. I'm here, I'm listening. She inhaled shakily. Grandma, I didn't come only because of last night. I came because I was scared something bad would happen to you if I didn't say anything. What do you mean? Her eyes glistened. Dad has been changing. Getting worse. I frowned. I know he's struggled with money, but... No, she interrupted, her voice cracking. It's more than that. It's the way he talks about you. The way he talks to me. The way he loses control. A knot twisted in my stomach. What did he do? She hesitated, then began. The truths she finally spoke. At first, she said, it was just yelling. He'd get angry at the smallest things. If my homework wasn't finished. If I didn't answer fast enough. If dinner wasn't warm. But then, he started saying things. What kind of things? She stared down at the table. That I was ungrateful. That I owed him everything. That he worked too hard and no one appreciated him. That I was just like Mom when she failed him. He said Mom left because I made her life difficult. My breath caught. That's not true, I whispered. Your mother left because she needed stability. Your father refused to change. Lily nodded. I know that now, but when I was younger, I believed him. A tear slid down her cheek. Then he started talking about you. My heart dropped. What did he say? That you had money you were hoarding. That you were selfish. That the house should have been his years ago. That you only cared about yourself. Her voice softened. He said once you were gone, everyone's problems would be solved. Gone. The word echoed inside me like a cold stone dropped into a well. Sweetheart, I whispered, did he ever talk about harming me? She hesitated, and that hesitation was my answer. Lily, tell me the truth. She swallowed hard. He said that sometimes life needed a push. She squeezed her eyes shut, tears falling faster now. He said he'd never let you waste your assets on your later years when he needed them now. I felt cold down to my bones. It was no longer only manipulation, or greed, or desperation. It was darker. Daniel had been thinking about removing me from the way. Not metaphorically, literally. The narrow escape. Lily wiped her tears with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. Dad and Elena were planning everything. I overheard them last week. She squeezed the mug with trembling fingers. He told her he had two options. Either force you to sign, or declare you mentally unfit. My breath froze. He said he could make you seem confused, forgetful, unstable. He said you were old enough that no one would question it. And Elena told him she knew someone, a doctor, who could write a report saying you weren't cognitively sound anymore. My pulse pounded in my ears. He said, her voice cracked, that if that didn't work, he'd handle it differently. I closed my eyes. He was going to have me declared incompetent. And if that failed, the belt, the pressure, the threats, he had already shown me a glimpse of where he was willing to go. The moment she broke, when I heard him say that, Lily whispered, I left the house. I walked all the way to the library because I didn't know where else to go. How long has this been going on? I asked, voice trembling. She clenched her jaw. Years. It got worse after he lost his job. He blames everyone but himself. Then she looked at me with raw, painful honesty. Grandma, I didn't just overhear him. I've been scared of him for a long time. I reached out and pulled her close, but she shook her head, not resisting, just bracing. There's more, she choked out. Tell me. She reached into her backpack again and pulled out a second document, crumpled, worn from being handled too many times. When she placed it on the table, my breath caught. It was a bank withdrawal slip. Jonathan Hale, $4,200. Account ending in 31. My account. How did he? I whispered. She spoke softly. He took papers from your desk when you were sleeping on the couch last month. He told me to distract you. I didn't know what he planned until it was too late. I covered my mouth. The betrayal sliced deeper each moment. Lily's lip trembled. I confronted him the night he took the money. He grabbed me by the arm and said if I ever interfered again, he'd make sure I regretted it. I felt a rage I had never felt in my life. Not at Daniel, at myself. I had let this go on. I had ignored the signs. I had protected him instead of protecting her. I had believed him instead of believing her. And it had cost her a childhood. The decision. Lily, I said softly, I'm so proud of you for telling me this. She shook her head. I should have said it sooner. You did it now, I said firmly. And that's what matters. She looked at me with wide, tired eyes. What are you going to do? I took a slow breath. Everything your father fears, I said quietly. She blinked. We're going to the police. We're going to protect you. We're going to protect me. And your father is going to face consequences. Her lips parted. For the first time that morning, she looked relieved. The call. I reached for the phone. I didn't call Daniel, or Elena, or anyone in the family. I called Attorney Carter. He answered on the first ring. Mrs. Hale, he said, I was just preparing the documents. Is everything all right? No, I said calmly. Things are worse than we thought. Tell me. I did. Every detail, every email, every thread, every bruise on Lily's wrists she had been hiding with bracelets. Every word I had ignored until it became dangerous. There was a long silence on the other end. Then he spoke with quiet but absolute clarity. Mrs. Hale, this is no longer just a financial matter. This is criminal. I know, I whispered. What do we do next? I'll be at your house in 15 minutes, he said. And I'm bringing law enforcement with me. When I hung up, Lily grabbed my hand. Grandma? Yes, sweetheart? Are you scared? I looked into her eyes. Her father had caused pain neither of us deserved. But we had each other now. We had truth. We had evidence. And we had a chance to end this. No, I said softly. Not anymore. Because fear only controls you until you decide it doesn't. And for the first time in decades, I was ready to fight back. Part 6. The Price of Healing. Attorney Carter arrived with the urgency of someone who recognized a storm in motion. 2 officers came with him. Officer Grayson and a woman I hadn't met before, Officer Delaney. Both walked into my home with professional calm, but I could see tension rippling under their composure. They introduced themselves to Lily first. Are you comfortable speaking with us? Officer Delaney asked gently. Lily nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. I stood beside her, but she lifted a hand with timid courage. Grandma, I can do this. I need to do this. I nodded. I'll be right here. The officers took her statement in the dining room while Attorney Carter and I sat in the living room. He reviewed the documents Lily had brought, the emails, the withdrawal slip, the crumpled printouts, and his jaw tightened with every page he turned. This is substantial, he said. More than enough for a formal investigation. I exhaled shakily. What will happen now? His tone was firm, but gentle. We're filing for an emergency protective order against Daniel. Today. Immediately. My pulse quickened. And there's more, he added. This situation involves financial exploitation, coercion, and, based on Lily's statement, escalating threats of physical harm. This is no longer a simple family dispute. Daniel will face legal consequences. A strange, hollow ache opened inside me. He's still my son, I whispered. Mr. Carter leaned forward slightly. I know, Mrs. Hale. And that's what makes this painful. But love does not excuse harm. And being his mother does not mean you must tolerate abuse. I nodded, tears gathering. I should have seen it sooner. He shook his head. Abuse is often invisible until it becomes undeniable. Your compassion doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. His kindness steadied me. Then Officer Delaney returned to the living room. Mrs. Hale, she said softly, your granddaughter was very brave. We have enough to begin immediate action. How is she? I asked. She's shaken, the officer said, but relieved to be heard. A tear slipped down my cheek. I had spent years thinking Lily was distant. That she didn't have time for me. That she'd grown away. But she hadn't grown away. She'd been silenced. By the same man who had silenced me. The first crack in Daniel's power. Within an hour, a temporary protective order was filed electronically. A judge approved it the same day. Daniel Hale. Restricted from approaching the residence within 300 feet. Restricted from contacting Margaret Hale. Restricted from contacting minor Lily Hale. Restricted from accessing financial assets belonging to Margaret Hale. The words looked surreal on paper. It felt like I was reading someone else's story. Mr. Carter handed me a copy. This order is in effect immediately. What if he shows up anyway? I whispered. Call us, Officer Grayson said. We will handle it. The confidence in his voice steadied the fear inside me. Lily walked into the room then, wiping her eyes. Officer Delaney followed behind her, her expression protective. Gran, Lily whispered, I'm sorry if I made things worse. I stood. You didn't make anything worse. You saved my life. She collapsed into my arms, and I held her tightly. Behind me, I heard Mr. Carter speak quietly to the officers. We'll need to prepare for the next steps. There will be a confrontation. He won't accept this silently. They both agreed. I felt Lily stiffen slightly in my arms. Grandma, she whispered, you don't know, he doesn't handle anything silently. I pulled back just enough to see her face. You're safe here, she nodded, but the fear in her eyes didn't fade. Because she knew him, better than anyone, better even than I did. The call that shook us. Around noon, while Lily rested on the couch, my phone began to ring. The sound pierced the quiet like a blade. Daniel. His name lit up the screen. I froze. Mr. Carter stepped forward immediately. Don't answer. But the ringing continued, aggressive, insistent, furious. He let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, the phone vibrated again. A text. You think this is over? Don't be stupid. Answer the phone. Now. Another text followed. I know you have people there. You're making a mistake. My throat tightened. Mr. Carter took the phone gently from my hands. Mrs. Hale, he's escalating. This is exactly why the protective order was necessary. He typed a message to the officer handling the case, documenting Daniel's violation. But the messages kept coming. You owe me. You're not taking my future away. You're going to regret this. Both of you. My pulse hammered. I felt the old instinct rising, to soften, to apologize, to de-escalate, to protect him from consequences. But then I remembered the belt. The shaken voice. The document he demanded I sign. The emails. Lily's bruises. No more protecting him. The home I no longer recognized. That afternoon, the officers installed additional locks and ensured every exit was secure. They guided me through everything. What to do if Daniel tried to enter, how to stay safe, how to report violations. It felt strange. My home, my sanctuary, now had protocols. I felt like a witness in my own life. By evening, the adrenaline had worn off. Exhaustion hit me so hard I nearly collapsed onto the living room sofa. Lily sat beside me, her head resting on my shoulder. I'm sorry you're going through this, she whispered. I brushed her hair gently. I'm sorry you went through it alone. We sat in silence until she finally lifted her head. Grandma, do you think he'll stop? I didn't want to lie. No, I said, I don't think he'll stop on his own. She swallowed. Then what happens next? I looked toward the window as the first stars blinked into the night sky, faint and distant. Next, I said quietly, we let the truth do what the truth does. She frowned. What does that mean? I took her hand. It means lies collapse eventually. Secrets break open. And people like your father, they eventually run out of places to hide. Her shoulders sagged with understanding. Tomorrow, I continued, we move from protection to accountability. The next morning, when dawn arrived the next day, I felt the first sliver of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not peace, not relief, something smaller, but sturdier. Resolve. The fight wasn't over. It hadn't even begun, but I was no longer alone. And that changed everything. Mr. Carter arrived early with a folder under his arm and determination in his stride. Mrs. Hale, he said as soon as he stepped through the door, we're filing for long-term legal protection and pressing charges. My breath stilled. Charges? I echoed. Yes, he said gently. Your son committed multiple crimes. And Lily provided crucial testimony. I looked at Lily. She wasn't trembling anymore. She wasn't silent. She wasn't hiding. She nodded at me with quiet strength. Grandma, we have to. I inhaled, exhaled, and with that breath, something inside me shifted forever. The woman who had spent decades bending, finally straightened her spine. Do it, I said. Whatever it takes. The price of healing. Healing is never clean. It is not soft. It does not arrive wrapped in forgiveness or simple peace. Healing costs. It costs the fantasies we cling to. It costs the illusions we built. It costs the love we gave to the wrong people for far too long. But it also gives. And as Lily leaned against me, her small hand squeezing mine, I realized healing had already begun. For both of us. And Daniel would soon learn that the love he had taken for granted his entire life was no longer something he could use, twist, or weaponize. Because love without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. And I was done surrendering. What remains after the storm? Storms do not end suddenly. The clouds do not tear open in a single moment. The world does not dry instantly. The ground stays soft, the air stays heavy, and the sky stays uncertain. That is how the weeks following Daniel's protective order felt. Like standing in the aftermath of a storm that was still deciding whether it was done. But something was different. For the first time, I was not bracing myself for his footsteps. I was preparing for my own. The legal aftershock. 3 days after the emergency order, Attorney Carter returned to my home with a stack of documents, a mixture of filings, evidence logs, and statements. Mrs. Hale, he said, laying everything neatly on the dining table, we're officially proceeding with criminal charges. My breath caught. Which charges? I asked. He adjusted his glasses. Financial exploitation, coercion, attempted extortion, threats of harm, property interference, and, if the district attorney decides, possible assault based on Lily's testimony. The words crashed into me like cold water. He could go to jail? Yes, Carter replied gently. He could. I felt something I didn't expect. Not relief, not satisfaction, not fear, grief. Grief for the son I had once carried in my arms. Grief for the little boy who used to tug on my hand and ask for one more bedtime story. Grief for the future I had imagined for us. But grief did not weaken me. It clarified me. Do what needs to be done, I said. Carter nodded once. And now, we wait. Lily's quiet resilience. Lily stayed with me while everything unfolded. Her parents knew, but by order of the court, Daniel could not approach her or me. Her mother dropped her off with a small suitcase and eyes full of worry. Take care of her, she whispered. I will. For the first time since she was a toddler, Lily slept in the guest room across from mine. At night, I sometimes heard her tossing or mumbling. Trauma lingers in the quiet. One night, when a thunderstorm rolled across the sky, she slipped into my room silently and stood by my bed. Gran, can I stay with you? I lifted the blanket. She crawled in beside me, curled against my side. Do you think he hates me? She whispered. My heart cracked. No, I said, brushing a tear from her cheek. He doesn't hate you. He just hasn't learned how to love the right way. Can someone learn that? She asked. Yes, Lily. People can change, but only when their consequences finally outweigh their excuses. She nodded slowly. Then I hope he's willing to learn. Her voice was so sincere, so fragile, that I felt tears prick my eyes. Even after everything he had done, she still hoped he could become better. Children are extraordinary that way. They don't root for perfection. They root for healing, even when the adults around them fail. The day of the hearing. The preliminary hearing was set for Wednesday morning. Lily stayed at home with her mother. I arrived at the courthouse with Attorney Carter at my side. The building was cold, the marble floors echoing every footstep, every whispered conversation, every beat of my racing heart. Inside the courtroom, Daniel sat alone at the defendant's table. When he looked up and saw me, his expression was not rage. It was something far more dangerous, entitlement. He lifted his chin, as if daring me to feel guilty. As if I should apologize for protecting myself. As if everything he had done was somehow my burden to bear. A familiar ache squeezed my heart, but then I remembered Lily's trembling voice when she said, "He told me if I didn't get you to sign, you'd be sorry." And suddenly, the ache dissolved. I took my seat behind the prosecutor. Daniel kept staring at me. His stare didn't break me. It confirmed everything. When the judge entered, the room shifted. Quiet, still, formal. The prosecutor listed every violation Daniel had committed. Every threat, every financial manipulation. Carter presented the documents, the texts, the bank withdrawal slip, the emails. Daniel still didn't look afraid. Until the judge said, "Mr. Hale, based on the evidence, the court finds substantial grounds to proceed." Daniel flinched, only slightly, but it was the first crack in the armor he had worn his entire life. Privilege, manipulation, denial. For once, consequences had finally arrived. The judge continued, As of today, the temporary restraining order will remain in effect. A full evidentiary hearing is scheduled. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Daniel's jaw clenched. His fists tightened. His eyes snapped to mine again. The storm wasn't finished, not by a long shot. But it was weakening. He no longer had unchecked power. He no longer had access. He no longer had control. The judge adjourned, and the bailiff escorted Daniel away. He tried one last time to meet my eyes. I didn't look back, not out of spite, out of freedom. The letter. 3 days later, a letter arrived in the mailbox, a familiar handwriting on the envelope. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a single page. Mom, I don't know how this got so far. I never wanted this. I was desperate, and you betrayed me. If you don't drop this, you will regret it. This isn't over. Daniel. Carter read it, then exhaled sharply. This is another violation, he said. We'll submit it immediately. I stared at the words. The threats no longer frightened me. They exhausted me. This isn't a man asking for help, I said quietly. It's a man who refuses to accept responsibility. Carter nodded, and the law will handle him accordingly. The visit that unraveled everything. A week later, the officers returned, not for a threat, but for an update. While they were here, Lily came downstairs holding something in her hands. Grandma, I found this in Dad's old backpack. She handed it to me. A notebook. The first page made my stomach twist. A list. Mom's account numbers. Estimated house value. Lawyer fees to avoid. What the court doesn't need to know. Who can sign as a witness. How to pressure Lily. Officer Delaney took it immediately. This is damning, she said. Carter turned to me. This could change everything. It shows intent, premeditation. It didn't surprise me. It didn't shock me. It just hurt. Because this notebook, this list, this cold planning. This wasn't a moment of lost control. This was deliberate, calculated. A man who believed his mother existed to serve him. A man who believed his own daughter existed to leverage. A man who believed consequences didn't apply to him. This was the storm's center. And now, finally, the world could see it. What remains? Weeks passed. Documents piled. Court dates were scheduled. Statements were recorded. Evidence grew. And slowly, the storm began to lift. Lily started smiling again. She slept without waking up screaming. She sat beside me on the porch while we watched the sun dip behind the trees. One evening, as the sky turned gold and pink, she whispered, Gran, do you think we'll ever be normal again? I took her hand. Lily, I said softly, normal is overrated. We don't need to go back to who we were. We just need to move forward into who we're becoming. She leaned her head on my shoulder. What are we becoming? I looked at the horizon. Stronger, I said, wiser, safer, and free. A long silence settled between us. A peaceful one. She squeezed my hand. I think I like that. I smiled. Me too. The most important truth. People think healing means everything goes back to the way it was. But healing is not a return. Healing is a transformation. You don't get the old life back. You build a new one. You grow from the ashes of the old. And in that new life, you find boundaries, strength, clarity, peace, and sometimes unexpected grace. But you also lose things. You lose illusions. You lose denial. You lose fantasies. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Nothing about the road ahead was easy. Healing rarely is, but it was honest. And honesty, after a lifetime of walking on eggshells, felt like a rebirth. The court moved forward with the case. Daniel fought the process, argued with every official, blamed everyone but himself. But the truth had taken root. And truth, once planted, has a way of growing no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. Lily testified bravely. Her voice shook, but it did not break. Her honesty carried weight. Real weight, the kind that only comes from pain spoken without exaggeration or malice. I testified too. I spoke about the pressure, the manipulation, the document, the threats, the fear, the betrayal, and the dangerous escalation that could have cost me my life. Daniel said I was lying. He said I was confused. He said I was too old to remember things clearly. He failed to notice that the judge wasn't looking at me like an old woman. He was looking at Daniel like a man who had run out of excuses. When the court granted a full protective order and set a date for the continued criminal case, something inside me settled. Not joy, not triumph, freedom. For the first time in 69 years, I had chosen myself. The quiet after the storm. Healing did not arrive with fanfare. It came slowly, in small signs. I noticed Lily laughing again. Not loudly, not without shadows, but laughing. I noticed myself breathing a little deeper each morning. Not cautiously, not fearfully, but steadily. I learned to sit on the porch with a cup of tea and let the world exist without tension coiling in my stomach. I started baking again. Cinnamon rolls, ginger biscuits, warm pies cooling on the counter. For a long time, I had forgotten what sweetness tasted like. Now I tasted it in everything. A letter I did not send. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter to Daniel. Not to send, not for the court, not even for him, for me. It said, "You were my son before you were anything else. Before your mistakes, before your anger, before the person you became. I loved you every day of your life. And I still do. But love is not permission. And forgiveness is not a free pass. I hope one day you understand the damage you caused. I hope one day you choose to change. Not for me, but for yourself. And for the daughter who still wishes you would try." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer. Some truths are not meant to be sent, only released. What remains after everything? People often think survival is the end of the story. But for us, for me, for Lily, survival was only the beginning. What remains now? Trust, rebuilt slowly. Peace, earned painfully. Strength, found unexpectedly. Love, reimagined with boundaries that protect instead of imprison. And hope, quiet, small, but solid. Lily once asked me, "Gran, do storms ever really end?" I told her, "Some storms pass, sweetheart. Others break us apart so we can grow into something stronger." And we did. We grew. We healed. We reclaimed our lives. And we became what we never had the chance to be before. A family defined not by fear, but by truth. If you've been with me through this entire story, thank you. Truly, stories like these aren't just narratives, they're reminders. Reminders that love can blind you, loyalty can be misused, family can hurt you, and courage can come late, but still arrive in time. If you're still listening, I have something important to ask you. Have you ever held on to someone long after they stopped treating you with love? Have you ever ignored the signs because facing the truth felt too painful? Wherever you are in your story, please remember, you deserve safety, dignity, and peace. Before you go, please subscribe, like, and comment if this story touched you or if you want more true, powerful, human stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? Your stories matter, your voice matters, and somewhere out there, someone needs to hear your truth. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.